I never thought that a Thursday night text from my grandson would end up being the thing that burned everything down. At 9:42 p.m., Isaiah sent me a WhatsApp video. Just said "LOL SMH" in the caption. I tapped it open. Blurry footage. Loud bar chatter. Then her voice, my daughter Brielle, sharp as a cracked bottle. She was at some rooftop lounge in Midtown, one of those trendy spots with glowing menus and overpriced cocktails, laughing too loud with two women I didn't recognize. She lifted her glass, smiled, and said, "Mama's just a worthless burden, but at least her check's never late." Nobody blinked. Not one friend said, "Don't say that." Nobody looked uncomfortable. Isaiah, sitting off to the side in his school hoodie, caught the camera angle in the mirrored wall behind her. He looked down. Quiet. That's when I paused the video. My thumb hovered over the screen. I didn't move. I set the phone face down on the kitchen counter. My tea had gone cold. The check I'd mailed 2 weeks earlier, $1,862 to be exact, was sitting in their account, same as it had for 34 months. Every payment marked house support, every sacrifice tucked in behind a smile. I paid their mortgage while they handed me the in-law suite like it was charity. She called me a burden. In public, with my grandson sitting right there. I opened the drawer under the microwave and pulled out the blue folder. Bank records, copies of endorsed checks, a worn photocopy of our 2021 agreement, signed and dated. I didn't say anything out loud. I didn't cry. I pulled out the page with the clause Brielle insisted on, back when they begged me to co-sign. Lifetime in-law suite residency secured as co-signer and contributing party. Her handwriting, her signature. Still legible, I plugged in the old Epson scanner, took a Post-it, labeled the stack primary evidence, and started scanning the first 5 checks, labeled each PDF with the date and confirmation number. The numbers lined up, month after month, year after year. I kept the house afloat while they shopped, traveled, smiled for Instagram. And now I had proof. I went back to my phone, rewatched the video once, then screen recorded it, saved it to both cloud drives, and emailed a copy to myself with the subject line, Peachtree Incident, October 19th, 9:42 p.m. Timestamped. Archived. By midnight, I'd filled an entire folder. The label read, Case, Brielle House Fraud, Initiation. 2 weeks earlier, on October 3rd, I stood in line at Fidelity Bank just after lunch, holding a cashier's check made out to Brightstone Mortgage Services for $1,862. It was routine by then. First Tuesday of every month, rain or shine, flu or not. I'd wait under those humming fluorescents, nod at the same teller, Renee with the silver glasses and coral lipstick, and hand over the funds like I was paying a light bill. She didn't ask questions, just stamped the receipt and slid it back toward me like clockwork. I didn't tell anyone how close it cut things this time. My prescription refill had to wait till the next Social Security deposit, and I skipped the fall church luncheon because I didn't want to show up without a contribution for the raffle basket. But I still mailed that envelope, walked it right up to the counter at the post office on Glenridge, paid extra for tracking, watched the clerk scan it, punched the code into my phone while still standing at the counter. Delivered. 10:42 a.m. next day. That's how they kept the house. Since April 2021, when Brielle called sobbing because they were 2 months behind and the lender was sending default warnings. "Mama, I didn't know who else to call," she'd said. "We'll make it up to you. You'll always have your own space here." I was living in a 1-bedroom rental in East Point at the time, could barely breathe from the mold. Of course I said yes. Back then, she made it sound like a partnership. She printed off the loan papers for me to read, walked me through the budget. I remember sitting at their dining table while Devin poured me peppermint tea, nodding like we were in agreement. We even hugged afterward. That was before the entitlement crept in, before I became their built-in backup plan. No more monthly thank yous, no more check-ins, just expectation. On October 3rd, I walked out of the bank holding the stamped carbon copy and drove straight home. Logged the payment in my ledger under the same title as always, Devin and Brielle, house support, then slid the paper into the blue folder. I didn't know it yet, but that would be the last time I ever wrote their mortgage check. She'd been chipping away at me for years, but always with polish, grins and good timing, the kind of cruelty that hides inside a laugh. I told myself not to take it personally when I didn't get the invite to Isaiah's third-grade recital. Brielle claimed it was an oversight, said the school must have sent the notice to the wrong email. I believed her then. Bought a program off another parent in the parking lot and watched my grandson play 3 songs on a borrowed cello, while she sat in the second row with Devon's mother and waved like she'd raised him alone. Last Christmas, she stood in front of the fireplace at their holiday party. New rug, fresh wreath, catered hors d'oeuvre, and made a little show about how I keep every flyer like we're still in the Great Depression. Her voice had that sugary pitch it gets when she wants to sound charming. Everyone laughed. Devon's coworkers looked over at me like I was part of the joke. I smiled through it, said nothing. Later, I cleaned up the kitchen while they drank spiked cider and posted photos online with captions like #FamilyGoals. But that video, her lips curling around the words worthless burden, landed different, not because she meant it more, but because Isaiah heard it and didn't flinch. That boy used to crawl into my lap just to hear me hum. We built pillow forts and made peach cobbler from scratch. I took him to urgent care when he broke his wrist falling off the monkey bars and held his hand the whole time, even when Brielle was too busy at work to answer the phone. Now he's filming her, watching her laugh at my expense, and sending it to me like it's just a meme. I don't blame him. He's a teenager, swimming in their values. But something cold settled in me that night. Not grief, not shock, just clarity. A long, flat line of it. They hadn't changed suddenly. I had just taken too long to stop pretending. I opened a new document on my laptop, titled it Incidents, and logged the date of the recital, the Christmas comment, and now the Peachtree video. Time, location, context. 1 paragraph each. It wasn't just a pattern, it was evidence. On October 9th, while the house was still dark and the coffee pot barely gurgling, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. The numbers on the screen glowed soft blue against the black. 6:15 a.m. I hadn't slept more than 2 hours, not after rewatching that rooftop video twice the night before, each time catching new things. The way Brielle's voice rose when she said worthless. The way she tapped her nails against her glass like a punctuation mark. I wasn't hurt anymore. I was done. I logged into Fidelity's online portal and clicked through to the scheduled payments. There it was, top of the list. October 31st, mortgage transfer to Brightstone Mortgage, account ending in 3,382. I hovered over it for a moment, breathing slowly, then pressed pause. A red icon blinked, asking if I wanted to confirm. I clicked yes. Then I deleted the whole recurring entry. Just like that, the lifeline I'd been feeding into their account every month was gone. It didn't feel rebellious. It felt necessary. Like closing a faucet that had been left running too long. I'd paid for 3 years without missing a single month. Nearly $70,000. More than half my pension lump sum. Every tax refund. Most of my savings. And in return, I got secrecy, mockery, and a child who filmed my humiliation like it was an inside joke. Once the payment was canceled, I took a screenshot of the confirmation page, saved it under my home support folder with today's date. Then I opened my ledger and struck a single line through the title, Devon and Brielle, House Support. Beneath it, I wrote, Authorization revoked. Status, closed. It felt like signing off on a failed loan. The house would go unpaid this month unless they figured it out fast. I wasn't going to tell them. No warnings, no gentle reminders. They had enough money for bottle service and boutique nail appointments. They could figure out how to cover their own roof. I closed the laptop, poured the lukewarm coffee, and sat with the silence. No part of me felt guilty, not after what I saw. They may have smiled to my face, but they'd built their comfort on my back. And now the foundation had just shifted. Later that same day, I stepped into attorney Kayla Brooks' office just past 3 p.m., the blue folder tucked tight under my arm, still warm from the sun through the car window. Her receptionist recognized me from when I had called the week before, said Kayla would see me in 15 minutes, and offered water. I declined. My hands were too full, and my throat too tight. I took a seat by the window, watching the streetcars roll by on Auburn Avenue. It had been years since I'd set foot in a law office, but something in me felt steadier than it should have. Kayla was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, but sharp-eyed and calm. She shook my hand like we were negotiating real estate, not betrayal. I didn't waste time. I opened the folder on her glass desk and laid out my stack of documents in the order I'd prepared. The fidelity receipts, screenshots of the autopay portal, the incident log I'd started, and finally, the signed 2021 co-residency agreement. The original, not a copy. Black ink on cream paper, with both our signatures and Devon's printed name as witness. She adjusted her glasses, read through the page, then tapped her pen against the margin where it stated, quote, "Contributor entitled to full residence rights in designated suite for the life of the mortgage." Her eyebrows lifted. "They signed this?" she asked, and I nodded. Both of them. I explained how the agreement came about, how they were weeks from losing the house, how they begged, promised it would be temporary, how I'd moved in and paid on time ever since. I didn't dress it up. I laid it out like a transaction, because that's what it had become. Not family, not favor, just financial exchange, with no respect left in it. Kayla nodded slowly as she read through my records. "This isn't casual help," she said. "This is a long-term contribution with legal and equitable interest, especially with this agreement in place." I watched her slide the document into a new manila folder, label it Martin Housing Agreement, and then type something quickly into her laptop. "We're going to start with title verification and documentation of your payments. Then we'll file notice of occupancy and interest." It didn't say thank you. I handed her the folder and said, "It's time they learned what that roof really cost." Kayla was halfway through the folder when she paused, slid a sheet out from the plastic sleeve, and angled it toward me. "These," she said, tapping the printout gently, "are gold." It was a screenshot compilation I'd pulled from my phone, text messages from Brielle, dated across 2022. I hadn't thought much of them at the time, just quick thank yous after each mortgage payment, always sent late in the evening, usually after a nudge or a forwarded confirmation. But Kayla was already marking the page with a green tab, her expression shifting from professional calm to quiet satisfaction. She read aloud from one. "Thanks again for covering this month. I swear we'd be out on the street if it weren't for you." Then another, dated July 14th. "This house wouldn't exist without you, Mama. I mean that." Her tone wasn't emotional, just factual. "This language acknowledges reliance," she said, "and consistent financial contribution. It reinforces what you said in the affidavit and supports the intent behind the co-residency agreement. Courts care about both." I told her I had more. Not all digital. A few old cards tucked into drawers, Mother's Day, Thanksgiving, little notes with things like, "Thank you for keeping us afloat," scribbled between the lines. She told me to collect anything in writing, even if it seemed minor. "The pattern matters," she said. "It shows understanding, not confusion." She flipped through the messages again, then turned to her legal pad and started a list labeled Supplemental Evidence. Under it, 1. Text message confirmations. 2. Handwritten cards/statements. 3. Bank transfers plus monthly tracking. 4. Witnesses of agreement history. She underlined witnesses twice and looked up. Did anyone else know about this arrangement when it started? I said yes. My neighbor Marta, who helped me move in, and Pastor Rayburn, who'd blessed the in-law suite the week I moved my things. She made a note to contact both, pending affidavits. As she compiled the pages back into the folder, she said, "They'll say it was just help, that there was no formal obligation." These messages make that argument harder to stand on. They knew exactly what they were accepting. I nodded once, firm, and they knew exactly who they were using. That night I didn't bother with dinner. I boiled water, poured it over a tea bag, and left the cup untouched beside the scanner while I worked. The blue folder sat open on the dining table, every receipt lined up in monthly order like teeth in a comb. I had kept them all, not out of distrust, but habit. Each one stamped by the bank, endorsed on the back by the mortgage servicer, my handwriting scribbled along the margin, covered from savings, late penalty waived, July tight, adjust groceries. I never thought they'd serve as ammunition. I thought I was building a record for myself, to remember that I had done something solid in a world where so much slips through fingers. I sorted the stack chronologically, from April 2021 to September 2024. 27 checks in total, each one proving the same thing. I carried the weight of their roof, and I did it on time. I scanned them one by one, saving each file with the date and transaction ID. No fancy labels, just the truth in numbers. After 2 hours, the PDF was complete. 93 pages, arranged, bookmarked, and labeled Home Support Chronology, Martin/Brooks Filing. I backed it up to 2 drives and emailed a copy to Kayla. Subject line, Full Mortgage Record. No smiley faces, no soft sign-offs, just my name and the date. As the files uploaded, I stared at the last receipt, September's. I remembered that day clearly. I'd been at the pharmacy, debating between 2 blood pressure medications my plan barely covered, and still made it to the bank by 2:55 p.m., 5 minutes before cutoff. That's how precise it had become. They played luxury, I played logistics. They sipped cocktails, I juggled essentials. They called it help, I knew better. Outside the window, porch lights flickered on across the street. I hadn't heard from Brielle since that message string in August, where she said they were stretched thin because of Devon's job switch and Isaiah's growing needs. She had no idea I was documenting anything, no clue I'd stopped the payment. That was coming soon enough. I clicked shut the folder, picked up the tea, cold now, and took a sip anyway. It tasted flat. But the record was in place, and for the first time in years, I had proof stacked higher than their excuses. The next morning, a text from Devon lit up my phone before sunrise. Just one line, no punctuation. Hey, did something happen with the payment? Bank called today. I stared at it for a moment, then locked my screen and left the phone face down while I finished folding laundry. 10 minutes passed before I picked it up again and replied, "Ask your wife." That answer must have rattled them more than silence. Within the hour, Brielle came through with a burst of messages, each one calibrated for guilt. First, "Are you okay? I'm worried." I didn't respond. Then, "You know Isaiah needs stability." Still nothing. Finally, "Please, don't overreact." That one made me laugh. Not out loud, but in that bitter, low way you do when someone insults your intelligence and expects you not to notice. Overreact? I'd paid their mortgage for almost 3 years without asking for a dime back. I let them turn my name into a silent line item while they paraded around like self-made professionals. They had no idea what overreaction would actually look like. I screenshotted the message thread and saved it into the folder as Exhibit 11. Then, I typed a brief note for Kayla. Bank reached out to Devon. Initial pushback started. Messages attempting to establish concern/frame withholding as emotional disruption. We had discussed this angle during our first meeting, how Brielle would likely lean into maternal guilt, how Devon might play the confused spouse, caught in the middle. It wasn't original, just familiar, predictable, even. What stood out, though, was Isaiah's silence. No call, no message, just absence. He'd grown up in the same house where I once cooked his oatmeal before school and picked him up from soccer when they got stuck in traffic. Now he didn't even text to ask why things were shifting. Either he didn't notice or he'd learned from them how to keep comfort by keeping quiet. By noon, I had drafted a short memo to Kayla summarizing the communication timeline. I kept the tone professional. Clear, precise. When people don't respect your role, clarity becomes your leverage. They wanted to pretend this was sudden. But I had a trail of receipts and 3 years of unpaid gratitude proving otherwise. By October 13th, things stopped being quiet. Marta, my next-door neighbor for 12 years and the kind of woman who notices everything without ever seeming nosy, rang my doorbell just before noon. She was holding her phone and shaking her head. "Did you know Devon's work email showed up in the HOA complaint log?" she asked before I could even say hello. I let her in, sat her at the kitchen table, and she pulled up the forwarded thread on her screen. There it was, Devon's name, company address, and a time-stamped message sent to the HOA board. Due to a missed mortgage support from my mother-in-law, our lawn service has been interrupted. I'd like to request grace on appearance violations until we get this resolved. The phrasing was slick, vague enough to sound diplomatic, direct enough to throw me under the bus. I kept reading, not just the message, but the tone. He didn't say we're having a payment issue or we're adjusting services temporarily. No, he framed it as my withdrawal that caused a disruption, like my monthly deposit had been a guaranteed utility, not a personal sacrifice. Like I'd failed some unspoken contract by finally saying no. Marta scrolled down to show the HOA's response. Mr. Calhoun, the board president, had replied within the hour. Records show lawn service contract prepaid in full through December. No action pending from HOA. She smiled faintly as she read it aloud. Seems like you were ahead of them. And I was. I'd paid for that landscaping package out of pocket in June, $680, full season coverage, because Brielle claimed Devin's hours had been cut, and she couldn't let the neighbors think we were slipping. Now he was using my name to excuse dead grass and skip trims, hoping the HOA would blame the older woman in the basement suite instead of their budgeting. I took a picture of Marta's screen, then forwarded the email chain to Kayla under the header HOA blame, false claim, another item added to the evidence stack. They weren't just careless anymore. They were strategic. They wanted to control the story before I could tell the truth. But they forgot I had already bought the mic. On October 15th, I was setting the table for one when Kayla's name lit up my phone. I answered before the second ring, and her voice was crisp, almost too calm. I just got off the phone with our title researcher, she said. You'll want to sit down for this. I didn't. I stood there, napkin still folded in my hand, while she read the details. Back in May, Mother's Day week, to be exact, Brielle had filed a quiet quitclaim deed, attempting to transfer full ownership of the Sandy Springs house into her name alone. No notice, no discussion, just a document recorded at the Fulton County Clerk's office bearing a forged notary stamp and a shaky version of my signature. They didn't even spell my middle name correctly. I didn't interrupt while Kayla explained how the stamp matched one belonging to a notary who had reported stolen materials last spring. She had already flagged it for investigation. The date lines up with May 11th, she said, her voice narrowing. The same week you told me you dropped off those garden tools for Isaiah's school project. You remember? I remembered everything about that week. I had bought a new set of gloves for him, plus 2 planters from Home Depot. Brielle hugged me at the door. Devin said they were planning a quiet weekend at the lake to recharge. They smiled in my face while back-channeling fraud behind my back. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why. I opened the drawer where I kept my lease copy and pulled out the original agreement, the one where they promised lifetime rights. I looked at Brielle's bold cursive next to my name and wondered how long she'd been planning the rewrite. Kayla said the next step was to file a notice of dispute with the county recorder and request a hold on any future changes to the deed. She was already drafting it. This wasn't a misunderstanding, she said. It was calculated. After we hung up, I sat down, not because I was tired, but because my hands had started to tremble. A forgery meant they were willing to commit crimes to push me out. What started as disrespect had turned into erasure. I texted Marta to ask if her son still installed cameras. That evening, I waited until the street settled and the last porch lights across the cul-de-sac clicked off. The in-law suite had its own entrance, but I didn't like the idea of being watched. Not now. The forged quitclaim had changed everything. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was active removal, dressed up in legal paperwork. So I moved quickly. I unscrewed the old brass number plate from the basement door, the one with Isaiah's birthday, 2729, engraved at the bottom, and replaced the lock code with 0000. Not subtle, not forgettable, just simple, a fresh baseline. Inside, I unpacked the small Ring camera system Marta's son, Drew, had dropped off earlier that afternoon. He offered to install it himself, but I told him I needed to do it. I wanted to see every angle, every corner. I mounted one outside the private entrance, angled low enough to catch license plates and faces, then set the alerts to notify both my phone and laptop. I ran the test twice. Motion sensor worked. Audio picked up every squirrel and car door for 3 houses. I didn't mind the noise, I just wanted a record. A clocked, indisputable record. After locking up, I composed an email to Mr. Calhoun at the HOA. The subject line read, Security and Title Concerns, Unit B. I attached a PDF of the forged deed, the real agreement from 2021, and a formal request to place an alert on any future title activity involving the property until my legal dispute was resolved. I kept the tone factual. No emotion, just names, dates, signatures. Let the evidence speak before I ever needed to raise my voice. I CC'd Kayla, then sat back and reviewed the footage from the past 30 minutes. Nothing but crickets and a breeze nudging the garbage bin. But still, it felt like a win. The locks were mine. The alerts were mine. The footage was mine. Even if they tried to play it like I was unstable, I now had timestamps and footage ready to answer back. This wasn't their house anymore. Not in the way they believed. They could post their filtered family dinners and curated smiles online. I had the deed. And now I had surveillance. By October 19th, the message was unmistakable. No knock on the door. No voicemail. No note slipped under the mat or text asking how I was doing. Brielle hadn't reached out once. Not even after I'd sent Isaiah his birthday card the week before, tucked with 2 tickets to the Botanical Gardens Fall Light Show. Not a cheap gift, not something picked up in a checkout aisle. I chose it carefully. He loved the glass sculptures, always asked to go when he was little. But the envelope hadn't been acknowledged. Not by him, not by her. I sat alone at the kitchen table that Thursday night, a cup of reheated soup growing cold in front of me, staring at my own handwriting on a duplicate of the card. I kept copies now. Of everything. There was nothing dramatic about the silence. No blow-up, no scene. Just a steady withdrawal, like watching someone pack your things in the dark. Brielle's absence didn't feel like forgetfulness. It felt like strategy, the kind that pretends to be above confrontation, but thrives on control by neglect. I got up, pulled the file, marked 2021 loan documents, and reread the clause that had kept me here. The reason I signed anything to begin with. Contributing party entitled to in-law suite residence for duration of mortgage. The ink hadn't faded. Their promises had. Back then, I'd cashed in my pension lump sum to keep the house from going into foreclosure. I remember sitting in the bank's side office, signing the withdrawal papers with my name shaking from more than just the pen. It wasn't just money I gave up. It was the final safety net I'd built from 37 years in nursing and a half-dozen side jobs. I never asked for repayment. I only asked to stay. I took out the last statement from April of that year, the one stamped foreclosure warning, and clipped it next to the deposit confirmation from my retirement fund. That pairing said more than any argument could. The math was undeniable, the timeline airtight. They hadn't saved the house, I had. And they hadn't just forgotten, they had chosen to erase. I uploaded both documents to the shared folder with Kayla, labeled the file, Pension Redemption, House Preservation. That Friday morning, I opened my laptop and composed an email I never thought I'd have to write. Not to my daughter, not to the man she married, and certainly not to the realtor who smiled in my face last spring while quietly posting my suite online as a potential rental conversion. The subject line read, Formal Property Meeting Request, October 22nd. I CC'd Kayla, added Mr. Calhoun from the HOA, and made sure the tone was clean, direct, and impossible to misread. I am requesting a formal sit-down to clarify misunderstandings related to our joint property and expectations. Please confirm attendance for Sunday, October 22nd at 4 p.m., Community Room A, St. Mark's AME Church. Pastor Rayburn has agreed to moderate. Legal counsel will be present. I reread it once. No anger in the language. No passive-aggressive jabs. Just the structure of a woman who no longer needed permission to claim space. I chose St. Mark's not just for the neutral ground, but because that room had weight. It was where Brielle was baptized, where Devin once made a teary Father's Day speech about doing right by family, where Isaiah played his first piano recital at age 7. That space held their history, and now it would hold their reckoning. Before hitting send, I attached 3 supporting documents. the original 2021 agreement, the housing support chronology, and the scanned quitclaim forgery side by side with the real notary log. I labeled the file set Meeting Prep, Evidence Packet A. I wanted no confusion about what we'd be discussing. This wasn't about bruised feelings or misunderstandings. This was about paper trails and legal obligations. Once it was sent, I placed a printed copy in a manila envelope and walked it over to Marta's house, asking if she could deliver it to Brielle in person that evening. I trusted Marta not to editorialize, just to deliver the envelope and walk away. She nodded once, took the folder without a word, and closed her door. Back inside, I updated Kayla's folder with the sent receipt and added a new document, timeline of notice, meeting setup. One more step taken, one more layer of silence broken. If they wanted to act confused, they could do it across a table, with witnesses. By Sunday afternoon, the church was quiet, except for the low hum of the heating vents and the shuffle of folding chairs being arranged around the long oak table at the front of Community Room A. Pastor Rayburn stood near the coffee urn, reviewing his notes. Mr. Calhoun sat beside him, already signed in as an official witness for the HOA. I arrived early, my folder of documents labeled, tabbed, and placed at my seat before anyone else walked through the door. This time, I didn't need to rehearse what to say. The numbers would speak first. At exactly 3:58 p.m., Brielle walked in wearing sunglasses and silence. Devin followed, holding a slim leather binder, his mouth tight. Their realtor, Jana Whitford, the same woman who once gushed over my cute basement aesthetic, trailed behind with an apologetic smile already fixed in place. They sat together at the opposite end of the table, whispering to one another, eyes darting over the papers I had laid out in neat rows. I didn't offer small talk. Pastor Rayburn opened with a brief welcome and a statement of purpose. We're here to clarify legal standing and resolve misunderstandings related to shared ownership and occupancy. This is not a debate, it's documentation. His tone was calm, but no one mistook the authority behind it. Brielle reached for the mortgage agreement first. Her hand hovered over my original signature, the one that had helped secure the loan in the first place. I watched her jaw tighten as she read the residency clause out loud, then pushed the page away like it was suddenly too hot to touch. Devin leaned in and pointed to a note in the margin but said nothing. Then came the payment log. 27 months, each check stamped and annotated. I passed it across the table like evidence in a courtroom. The silence thickened. I saw their realtor glance toward the altered quitclaim in the evidence packet. She frowned, leaned over to whisper something to Brielle, who responded with a stiff shake of her head. They hadn't expected me to bring it here, in public, with legal names and printed timestamps. They were ready for a guilt plea, not a paper trail, and I was just getting started. I moved through the documents with precision, not haste. First, the annotated bank statements, each month marked with the check number, date, and cleared amount. Then, the screenshots of Brielle's text messages thanking me for payments. I read one aloud. "Thank you again, Mama. This house wouldn't exist without you." Her voice didn't interrupt. Her body didn't move. Even Devin, usually quick to interject, stared down at the table like the grain of the wood might offer an escape. Next came the notarized co-residency agreement. I placed it at the center, angled toward the witnesses, and let it sit for a beat. Pastor Rayburn leaned forward, reading the clause that guaranteed me lifetime residence. His expression didn't shift, but I saw his brow tense. He cleared his throat but didn't speak yet. Let the weight of it land. Then, without commentary, I slid the altered quitclaim across the table, side by side with the official notary log from Fulton County. Highlighted dates, stamped discrepancies, forged signature. Silence clamped the room like a sealed vault. Brielle opened her mouth, then closed it again. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and slow, like someone trying to find the ground mid-fall. "Mama must be confused," she said, hands folded too neatly in her lap. "There's no way I would have." I cut her off, not with volume, but fact. "That document was filed May 11th, the same week you brought me flowers for Mother's Day and told me I was the glue holding your home together." I turned to Mr. Calhoun. "That notary stamp was reported stolen. It never existed in connection with this house." Her mouth opened again, but Pastor Rayburn raised a hand. "Let the record reflect," he said, "that the documentation presented includes bank receipts, legal agreements, and a confirmed forged deed. What I see here is a woman who's kept your household afloat and been repaid with deceit." Devin shifted uncomfortably. Jaina, the realtor, scribbled something in her notepad and whispered to Brielle again. The control they'd counted on, family dynamics, silence, emotional leverage, was slipping through their fingers, and they didn't yet know how to grab hold of anything else. The air in the church hall had turned thick, not from heat, but from the collective realization that the truth was no longer abstract. It was printed, signed, time-stamped, and in front of witnesses. No one spoke for several seconds after Pastor Rayburn finished. Brielle's eyes glossed over, not with tears yet, but the kind of still panic that sets in when performance fails. Devin reached for the forged deed again, squinting as if he could find a loophole hiding in the margins. Then Pastor Rayburn straightened, folded his hands over the table, and said what no one else would. "What I see here," he repeated, slower this time, "is a woman who kept your household afloat and been repaid with deceit." He turned, not to Brielle, but to Devin. "Son, if I were you, I'd consider whose name is still on that deed, and what it says about how you got there." The sentence landed like a gavel. Devin blinked, looked at Brielle, then over to Jaina as if silently asking who was supposed to answer for all this. Jaina leaned back in her chair, clearly distancing herself from the mess. She wasn't there to argue fraud, just to facilitate a sale, and now she knew there wouldn't be one. "I stayed quiet, not from grace but calculation. My case didn't need passion. It was built on paper, memory, and 3 years of log transactions. Any apology at this point would be self-preservation, not remorse. So I let the silence stretch, let them sit in the weight of what they'd done, while others, neutral eyes, watched them squirm." Brielle finally dropped her hands from the table. "It wasn't meant like that," she mumbled. "We just didn't think." Pastor Rayburn cut her off, not unkindly. "But you did act. You filed a forged deed. You withheld credit from the woman who's held your mortgage together. That's not just a lapse. That's a decision." Devin shifted again, this time shrinking into the back of his chair. Kayla opened her folder and handed a sealed envelope to Brielle. "This is a notice of pending civil motion. You'll receive formal delivery by week's end, but I'm giving you advance awareness now. Control, once theirs, now sat fully in my hands." Devin cleared his throat but couldn't look anyone in the eye. "This might be a miscommunication," he said, voice brittle, not defiant, just weak. He glanced at Brielle, but she didn't jump in to back him up. Her hands were clasped so tightly in her lap, I could see the white of her knuckles. Whatever united front they thought they'd present had already cracked under the weight of the evidence. Miscommunication didn't explain 3 years of silence when the checks kept clearing. It didn't explain forged documents and HOA blame games. It certainly didn't explain pretending I didn't exist when the mortgage ledger said otherwise. Brielle, still staring down, let out a forced sniffle. A few tears came, but they arrived late and without conviction. No apology, no explanation, just the beginning of a slow unravel. Jaina sat motionless beside her, now more observer than advocate. She knew a sale was off the table. Property tied up in civil action, with forged signatures, didn't pass clean through escrow, and the paperwork I delivered made sure of that. "Mr. Calhoun, folding his hands over the HOA attendance log, leaned forward slightly. "I'm stating for the record," he said, voice flat and clear, "that the HOA is placing a freeze on any ownership transfers, title activity, or listing approvals related to this property until a legal resolution is filed and verified." He looked at Devin, then Brielle. "You won't be selling anything." The moment hung there, final and undeniable. Kayla slid a second folder across the table, this one addressed to the HOA. "Here is a certified copy of the occupancy agreement and payment chronology. It's been notarized and submitted to the county recorder's office as of Friday. If you need to verify residency status, You'll reference this document going forward. It was the sound of administrative procedure that made it real. Not my voice, not my pain, but stamps, filings, confirmations. I had turned their secrecy into structure, turned my silence into proof. No one tried to argue. No raised voices, no final accusations, just the soft collapse of a plan that had depended on my cooperation and my shame. They had neither now. Devin and Brielle had 48 hours to vacate, and they hadn't lingered. No goodbye. No apology. Just a moving truck that came and left under a gray sky while I sat upstairs with Marta, sipping tea and waiting for the call. Now the suite smelled faintly of lemon polish and the hint of lavender I'd tucked into the baseboards years ago. They hadn't touched my things. My quilt still folded at the foot of the bed, Isaiah's framed kindergarten photo still on the dresser. But something had shifted in the air. The space no longer felt like borrowed ground. It felt reclaimed. I moved slowly, not out of caution, but purpose. Checked the outlets, replaced the batteries in the smoke detector, reprogrammed the ring system to sync only with my phone. Every click, every adjustment was a declaration. This space was mine by right, not sentiment, not guilt, and certainly not pity. On the small desk near the window, I placed a single photo frame. The still from the Peachtree video captured the moment Brielle leaned back, drink in hand, laughter half-formed. I'd cropped the image tightly, just her mouth and the words she spoke. Worthless burden. Below the frame, a small brass plaque I'd had engraved now read, Reminder, value cannot be bought, only shown. There was no satisfaction in their absence, only relief. Not because I'd won, but because I'd finally stopped asking to be seen. I'd forced the paper trail to speak, where love had failed to translate. Let them call it cold. Let them call it excessive. The truth didn't need to please anyone. It just needed to be heard. Outside the garden window, the maple tree had begun to shed. I opened the curtain, light spilling onto the floor, and stood there a moment, hand resting on the windowsill, not watching the leaves, but the space they left behind.